So I've been thinking about this a lot, and it's a little uncomfortable to admit. I realized that there's a lot of things that I believed about people that had more money than me. I used to think that, the people that had money, they were just like a little out of touch. Like, haven't you ever driven by like a neighborhood where all these like big, massive homes are? And you kind of think to yourself and imagine what it's like to be living in, these homes. Everybody's having high tea, they're just lounging, you just make up stories, right? About what you think their lives would be like. And, it kind of generates that belief that, those people are out of touch. They're not really like down the level that I'm living. And, perhaps, to a small degree that is true. But what I've realized over the years is that everybody has a story. They may have grown up in poverty and worked their way up, started a business. They may have inherited some of the money, but are turning it around and doing good for people. There's so many other scenarios that we could kind of imagine and take away, as opposed to believing that they're just out of touch and don't really understand what it's like to live the day to day. And people sometimes live beyond their means. So, maybe you may see them in this fancy house or, wearing the designer clothes, but behind all of that, you really don't know what the story is for those. So sometimes you got to just change our mindset about what it's like to have money. And one of the other beliefs that I kind of probably made up for myself is that they, people with money, they have advantages that others don't. And this is a controversial one because part of that is true and part of it isn't. In the sense that, yes, money does give you opportunity, it puts you in rooms, it provides some freedom, maybe. I wouldn't even say less stress, to be honest with you, because the stress just changes to something else. But does it provide them more advantages? I think I'm going to go on the side of yes, it gives them advantages, but at the same time, the people that don't have, or maybe it wasn't given to them on a silver spoon, their advantages is that they have grit, they have determination, they have willpower. Some of those things kind of lack when you are just handed money to you because your parents had it. And so So I think there's an argument for both sides. There are advantages, but at the same time, I think that lessons learned really does make a difference, right? Sometimes learning the hard way really makes things stick. And that is your key to how you're going to succeed in the rest of your life. And then if I look at how that belief kind of impacted me, I almost, justified by saying, well, they had those advantages. So therefore, maybe I just don't need to try that hard. And that, again, that belief system that we generate for ourselves is, it has a negative impact on your own personal progress. So assuming that people that have money have the more advantages really kind of downplays the fact that you're not working hard enough or you're not using your own personal opportunities, right? Sometimes getting in the room doesn't mean that you need someone to actually bring you in the room with you. You not need to make space for yourself. In this generation, time, era, we are so much more ability to meet people. Now, with social media and the internet and all these things, it has made us a little bit more, online as opposed to in person. But I think that the tides are changing there. I think that people are coming back to realizing that you need people. You need people, and just getting out there and talking to people will open doors. So, we got to just break that persona and that belief that, what, this is too hard. I don't fit in. I don't belong there. Those are all beliefs that are holding you back and restricting you from the person that you want to become. Another thought that has come across my mind and, probably generated a belief is that I couldn't relate to them. I couldn't relate to someone that had more money. So if I go back into my childhood and I think about my teenage years and looking up to some of the adults in my life, and there were people, that are surrounding that had money, and I did kind of put them as like, out of touch, right? They are someone that maybe just doesn't get who I am. And again, there's always a little bit of truth to these beliefs, but how they impact the way we live and the way we make decisions, it really does have an impact. So, can they relate to, my upbringing? Maybe not. But does it matter? Did it matter that they didn't relate? The idea of talking to people that are different from us is that it's a learning opportunity. It's the way to kind of extract maybe what their lives were like, how they started out. A lot of people that I knew immigrated to Canada. And that process I know nothing about because I was born here. So, it doesn't always mean that they don't have a story or there's more to um, who what made them become who they are. So again, breaking that belief, no, they can't relate to me or I can't relate to them. Maybe it's just a learning opportunity for you to open your eyes and for them to open their eyes. Then another thought that came across my mind is that, you know, they, it was them versus us, right? I don't know how I could possibly cross that line over into the other side. Again, because of all the other beliefs, you're putting them kind of on a pedestal and saying, hey, that's how the rich people live, and this is how we live down here. And again, it really puts barriers in the way we think. It isn't us versus them. There isn't this definite line. Yes, there are people making more. There's the Sunshine List that comes out every year, and it marks people that make over $100,000 that work in government. Now, $100,000 these days is not the same as it was probably 20, 50 years ago when they created the Sunshine List. Um, and it's really to hold government accountable to, where your tax dollars are going. But when I was younger and I looked at the Sunshine List, I'm thinking to myself, wow, these are people that have made it. They must be living the life now, traveling the world, doing these things, right? Sort of like unreachable. And then as you get older and you start to make more money, and you're like, oh, wait a minute. You make more, you spend more. And the difference between the two probably it remains the same as you kind of continue on through life, if you don't have a strategy. And so, that persona of them versus us, it really needs to be broken down. And that way, if you don't think of it in that manner, that you belong with those set of people, you'll start to believe and change your own perception of who you are and what you're capable of doing. So if I take all those beliefs and I kind of sum them up, I think that I really want to change that mindset to think that I have the ability to do more, to enter rooms, to experience things. And I think that is what has driven me throughout my path. And so I encourage you. I encourage you to take a look at what are the things, and it usually comes from your childhood or your teenage years or even what your parents have taught you, how you perceive people with money. And ask yourself, has that impacted my own personal financial situation? What I want to achieve, what I have achieved, and what I continue to strive for. And I think we'll be better off if we really kind of convert those beliefs into something that you internalize that is possible. It is possible to get to your goals and where you are striving for in life. So, I'm Carolyn, and I have conversations about money that most people avoid. If this made you think a little differently, then you're in the right place.